Well, hello there. You're watching the press preview. A first look at what is on the front pages as they arrive. And in the next half an hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with the Daily Mail's consultant editor, Andrew Pearce, and the journalist and author, Elizabeth Day. Very good evening to you both. Let's see what's on the front of some of those papers. We can kick off with the Eye, leading with the decision by Charlie Gard's parents to bring an end to his treatment. The headline, "Goodbye, our little warrior." A very similar headline on the front of the Daily Mirror. Similar headline again on the Metro's front page, with Charlie expected to be taken off life support before his first birthday on Friday next week. The Sun, "We're so sorry we couldn't save you, Charlie." Here's the Daily Mail. It reports that parents of Charlie Gard bitterly condemn doctors, saying, "We had the chance to save you, but we weren't allowed." The FT's top story, different one, protests over the Polish government's attempts to reshape how its judicial system operates. And police chiefs are warning some consumer devices like televisions and refrigerators may leave householders open to hackers. That's the front of the Telegraph. The Daily Express suggests the safety of statins is being called into question, with doctors unable to agree about the heart drugs. The Times says the government will end the practice of houses sold on leases that force owners to make escalating rental payments. And the Star reports that Moors murderer Ian Brady's body is still in a mortuary after undertakers refused to touch him. Well, I'm joined now by Andrew Pearce and Elizabeth Day. Very good evening to you both. I mean, incredibly sad day, and I think the only story we can really start on is this one. It's such a gorgeous picture of Charlie Gard, of course, before he was diagnosed, before his parents even realised that he was ill, but, you know, ending that legal battle tonight.
It's tragic any which way you look at it, and this front page is, I think, the most striking that we've seen tonight. A photo of Charlie Gard that I've never seen before, taken, as you say, before he became ill with mitochondrial DNA depletion syndrome. And you just look at that face and think, what an appalling decision to have to make for his parents, who really aren't very old themselves. I mean, his mother's only 31. And the Daily Mail is reporting here that when she gave her statement in court today, the lawyers and even the judge were in tears. And it's one of those heartbreaking decisions that I think reveals once again that the courts are a blunt instrument when it comes to deciding on life or death issues, particularly when it involves an 11-month-old baby.
A blunt instrument, but we're better to make the decisions.
I agree. And I think, although it's a blunt instrument, it's the only one that we have. And I would rather these decisions were made without being confronted by that gorgeous smiling face there. But ultimately, I suppose we have to come down on the side of medical evidence. And I think the doctor's concerns were that Charlie might be feeling an enormous amount of pain, but might not be able to express it. And it's an incredibly sad story. But as you say, it's sort of the only system we have. And until we devise anything better, this is where we're at.
Yeah, look, it's terrible, isn't it? It's a tragedy, and you can understand the parents' hand-wringing frustration and despair when finally they're confronted with this scan which shows it's gone too far now for their little boy, whereas just a few weeks ago they thought there was still a chance. And they are the mum and dad, and, you know, some people would say, I might say that myself, shouldn't you trust the mum and dad's instincts? Doesn't the mum know best? Would a mum really put her little infant child through an awful lot of pain unless she thought there was a real chance of it could improve his life? I think she obviously genuinely thought he wouldn't be in any more pain. I think it's one of the most heartrending stories we've had to confront in this country for years. But every day, parents and doctors are having these terrible decisions to make about whether to turn a life support machine off. And that picture, as Elizabeth said, is so shocking because as every mum, dad watching tonight will think, gosh, there but for the grace of God goes our little baby. And that's why it's so awful.
If I just point to the front of the Sun on the same story, we're so sorry we couldn't save you, Charlie. The words that they said outside court, I mean, we've seen the pain that they've been in sort of etched on their faces over the months. I don't
know how they're still standing.
But we have to stress that the narratives this evening are completely opposing between what the parents are saying, and you're referring to that scan and this implication they could have saved him, and what the doctors are saying, which is actually that this was never the case and that the doctor in the States was peddling a false promise. What do we think about that?
Well, I think the feeling was that the doctor in the States was offering something that hadn't even been tested on mice. So it was a deeply experimental drug. And even if it worked, it wouldn't have cured him or ameliorated Charlie's condition. It would have just stopped further deterioration. And I think what's particularly heartrending about this case is that obviously a baby can't speak, can't express his own wishes. Whereas when you get these sorts of High Court cases that are also enormously tragic at end of life, or with people with motor neuron disease, and we've seen one of those recently as well, and then a few years ago with Tony Nicholson, the Right to Die campaigner, they could at least express themselves. And this is what's so difficult about it, because I don't doubt for a second that everyone here is acting in what they perceive to be Charlie's best interests. And that's the saddest thing of all.
Yeah, what I'm still queasy about was President Trump becoming involved. Well then, look, nobody's surprised President Trump will seek a good headline anyway, because by God he needs them. But the Pope got involved too. I found that very surprising, and he was offering the Vatican hospital. But you see, the Pope, of course, believes in the right to life at all costs. And that's commendable in one sense, but in a sense it ramped up the story even more. It made it a worldwide issue, and the pressure then on everybody was even more intense, and that delayed a decision possibly that could have been taken earlier, whether to turn that life support machine off.
And the Eye this evening saying goodbye, our little warrior, and we understand that that life support machine will be turned off before his first birthday, which would be next Friday, and obviously we don't know the timeline.
It would be too heartbreaking, wouldn't it? What are they going to do if he made it to his first birthday? Light a cake, light a candle. I mean, it'd be too awful, wouldn't it?
I mean, apart from anything else, it must just be... I'm sure they're getting an enormous amount of support from the media and from the attention, but it must also be a very curious kind of pressure to be recognised on the streets, because this story has been front page news, when you're going through something that is a profoundly personal tragedy after which you will never be the same again. And for it to be news as well just must be quite a strange thing to go through.
And they're going to need a lot of help after this, the parents, because who is equipped to be at the centre of a worldwide media storm for days, if not weeks on end, and then to lose the little fellow they loved most of all? It's going to be really difficult.
And actually, for everyone that's been involved, the judge himself, as you say, crying in court, and the medical staff.
And who turns that
nurses,
medical support? And who has to turn that machine off? How awful.
Yeah, a really tragic story. Let's move on to this story that's leading in the Financial Times tomorrow morning. A total different tack, but of course a big story for us today, and that was Jared Kushner's appearance behind closed doors, although maintaining that he was being fully transparent.
Yes, well, Jared, what do we think of Jared? I mean, he looks like he's sort of moulded out of wax, doesn't he?
He sounded very young as well when he spoke. We don't get to hear him. Well, he looks young, which isn't a surprise, but when we hear him, he actually also sounds...
Yes.
I don't know, just...
He's
young.
He's a queer fish. But yes, he had these 4 meetings with this Russian lawyer, and he is insisting that nothing of any note happened during those meetings, and he was just sort of sounding her out, but he didn't get any information. But the whole thing is now starting to stink to high heaven. I mean, there's Jared Kushner, there's Donald Trump Jr. The idea that Donald Trump Jr. didn't tell his father about that meeting, I think, is ludicrous. And the idea that they were just going to this meeting just to sort of see what happened, you know, they didn't expect to find anything bad on Hillary Clinton. I mean, clearly they were going, and clearly I think it was a sort of transactional relationship, which obviously is illegal under the American Constitution.
I think the Russian ambassador was one of the meetings, and Jared said, I left, and he left Trump Jr. there, which sort of drops him in it now too. But you just knew the moment Jared Kushner was going to be a senior advisor to Donald Trump, this was going to be problematic. You didn't realise it would be problematic for the president within barely 6 months of moving into the White House. I mean, I'm still reeling from, was it G20 a couple of weeks ago, when there was Ma Merkel, Mrs May, and in the middle was his daughter, Trump's daughter. I mean, what's that about?
So bizarre,
how weird is that? And still, they've got this new communications director there who cleverly put Jared Kushner out in front of the cameras, although, as Elizabeth said, he looked and sounded 10. Trump is still tweeting away.
I know, I was going to bring up the tweet saying it's a witch hunt, and he said he's going to step back.
I mean, to call it a witch hunt again, I just find sticks in the craw. As someone who studied, 1950s McCarthyism and anti-communism in America, which was genuinely a witch hunt and which put people out of their livelihoods for years and years and years, I think that's the most despicable thing to call this. It is not a witch hunt.
I don't think he's a great
historian,
student of American history, really. He's good at making money and losing it and making it again.
And making
using the word
sound
very.
bites. I mean, you know, to his crowd, to his voters, to call it a witch hunt is genius.
This will play to his core, but it's only his core supporting him at the moment because his latest poll rating is 38%. Normally, at this stage of an American presidency, you'd expect them to be on about 58 to 62%. So he's fallen quite a long way by the wayside. I never thought, actually, a lot of people said he won't last. I thought he might confound expectations and turn out to be a rather good president. I'm beginning to think his time might be up. This Russian thing is clearly a big problem. His lawyer has said tonight very explicitly, we have not talked about pardons for the president. But that's, again, because he was tweeting, sending out misleading messages. I can pardon myself. Shut him up.
No, and Jared Kushner, of course, hoping that by standing in front of the White House and looking sort of angelic, that'll be the end of it. But there's still this FBI investigation ongoing.
And it's not going to stop.
Yeah,
and the more the president says don't do it, the more intense it will be. And it has to be seen to be intense.
And he is like a sort of little child lashing out to people that are closest to him, because now he's turned against the Republicans as well, saying, you know, guys, you should have supported me.
I've got my
you
back.
couldn't have won without me. And it's just a great story.
Well,
Whoever's writing the official history of the Trump presidency may not be such a long history to write.
And I just love, I don't know if you saw our report in News at 10, that Ian Rankin, Lee Charles and Anne Cleves saying that it's giving them a run for their money because fact is stranger than fiction at the moment, and you just couldn't write it.
You don't need a satire.
Well, interestingly, that's why I thought the last season of House of Cards wasn't as good as the previous one.
A lot of people have said that, haven't they?
Because this is better?
Yes, because real life
Sky
is
News
more...
is where it's at. You don't need to watch any of that anymore. Let's just finish this segment on this shrinkflation story, because we heard, didn't we, a little while ago about the demise of the Toblerone, and here we are. The Yorkie is on the shrink.
Yeah, this is the Office of National Statistics, who obviously have to do work. It's not just a boring job looking at actuarial graphs and Venn diagrams. They have discovered that shoppers are quite right to complain that chocolate bars are smaller. In fact, it's a range of foods are being, they're calling it shrinkflation. So they're charging often more money, but for considerably less food. Now, they'll probably blame it on Brexit. It's nothing to do with that. They're just greedy, grasping manufacturers who are squeezing margins more and more.
Well, I think they're saying that the impact of Brexit has yet to percolate through.
It's been going on for 5 years.
Yes, no, I know, but
so even you can't blame this on Brexit, Elizabeth. Elizabeth will try and blame this on Brexit. This phenomenon that's been going on for 5 years before David Cameron even called the referendum,
Elizabeth. You'll be starving
Elizabeth.
because your Terry's chocolate orange.
Well, I don't eat Yorkie. Anyway, Yorkie isn't for women anyway. Remember, that was the whole point of the ad. It's not for girls. That's boys' chocolate.
It is outrageous. My previous flatmate was part of that advertising campaign, and at the time, I didn't think to question it, which just shows how far...
Well, she got paid, didn't she?
He sexist. Anyway,
there was a woman in it as well.
Shrinkflation is happening. But what is good is that it seems to be all the unhealthy foods.
Yeah.
Chocolate bars, fruit pastels,
No, you can guarantee it'll be everything. Look, toothpaste, that's good stuff.
Yeah, it's a bit sneaky doing it on loo roll too.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe you'll need less of it if the food is.
Oh, stop!
Let's not go there. I think this is a perfect.
You can always rely on the left.
Take a little
you can always
break.
rely on the left to lower the tone.
I love the fact that I'm now the left.
You're the left.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah,
okay,
you're
let's
left of me.
Continue to bicker during the break, but still to come. Drinking to forget. We hope you'll remember to join us after this. A very warm welcome back. You're watching the press preview with me now, the Daily Mail's consultant editor Andrew Pearce and the journalist and author Elizabeth Day, who've just been gossiping all through the advert break. We've been having a lovely chat, haven't we? Let's see what the weather has got in store for us. Oh, no, that's later on, in fact. So we'll go through the papers. So I don't know why I'm going straight ahead to the weather. Let's look at the front of the Telegraph now. And this is a comment Jill Archer's made. This BBC salaries row continuing to bumble on. And Jill Archer's saying that the salaries are actually obscene. It's only the big stars that are getting the top whack, and she said that she gets 16 grand a year.
Yes, I mean, what we really needed was Jill Archer, matriarch of Radio 4. The actress who plays her, Patricia Green, is this fabulous woman, and she has come out and said, as you say, she's on £16,000 a year.
She'd get more stacking the shelves at Lidl.
Yeah, and for someone who
Which is a good job, of course, not denigrating
someone who's
it, but...
the linchpin of daily Borsetshire life, who is a major character on one of the most popular long-running sort of radio dramas of all time. To be on that it's actually quite shocking. And Andrew and I have just been talking about how outraged we are about BBC salaries. I'm outraged about the gender pay gap. I think it's completely ludicrous that some of the best female presenters on the radio, including Jenny Murray and Jane Garvey, weren't on the list whatsoever. So the fact that there is such a conspicuous pay gap in a public sector, publicly funded media organisation, really, I find pretty disgusting.
It absolutely stinks, actually, not least because those men who run the BBC, because all the suits are men, of course, they've never had a female Director General, they've known for years about this, but they've always been able to hide behind the cloak of anonymity, thinking it'll never get out. And now, in a sense, the gender pay row has obscured the fact that they're also paying telephone directory salaries, enormous salaries. Why does Gary Lineker, who presents a dreary football programme, earn nearly £2 million? Can't he flog a few more bags of crisps? I mean, it is quite ridiculous.
And yet, all the three of us were saying in the advert break, weren't we, that we know personally people who work in the BBC, in whether it be local news or whatever, who've got, postgraduate experience.
Go on a local radio station, see what they're getting paid.
I mean,
and that's really important. Yeah. Well, they're getting paid what Jill Archer's getting paid. I mean, I've been listening to the Archers for 30, 40 years. I think it is such a scandal, but I suspect what will happen is they'll sort of move some of the men out. They won't put the women's pay up. They may cut the men's pay. But they've said they'll equal it by 2020.
Yeah.
Well, it's outrageous.
It is outrageous. And I think actually the numbers involved obscure the fact that the gap is relevant in very many different sectors of society. Because if it's happening to the highest paid TV and radio stars in the country, then you can bet your bottom pound that it is happening to people who are in ordinary, roads and ways of life, people who are sort of eking out a living and trying their best to make ends meet. You can bet your bottom pound that,
I mean, I've rarely agreed with anything Harriet Harman's ever said or done.
I think you about to say me.
No. That's true too. People on the left. But Harriet Harman has been banging on for years about this, and she's been proved right, hasn't she? Because if the BBC, with all its hand-wringing moralising too, of all places, can't get it right, the public service broadcaster, world famous, a great export for Britain, can't pay women equally.
I know, but I have to do my job and say that they did point out that they are above national average when it comes to other companies. They're on about 10%, the disparity between men and women, whereas the national average is 18%. It's not acceptable.
But they have a light shining on them that other institutions and organisations don't, because they are the BBC.
Well, let's see if they can sort it out before 2020, as they've been encouraged to do. Maybe some of the top staff at the BBC will be drinking to forget, also on the front of the Telegraph tomorrow morning. This is the fact that scientists say it's actually harder than you might think.
Well, that's probably because these academics probably drink half a glass of sherry once a week and they think that doesn't matter. But, blokes who go out, or women who go out and have a big session, I know if I've had too much drink sometimes, I completely forget things in the morning and then it sort of comes flooding back in the afternoon.
Oh, Andrew.
Oh, no,
I mean, this is a different show.
Oh, no, did I? Oh, did I really?
I'd love to know what
exactly.
Love Island.
Not that sort of thing.
Naughty Tory boy. Have some nights out.
So I just think these stupid researchers at university, I just don't get.
Andrew,
Yes, I can.
Well, I'm not sure you can say that.
I do not think people who drink a lot of alcohol remember more than they've forgotten. I don't believe it.
Well,
and I'm not an academic.
You
don't need to be.
Let's drill down into the actual statistics. This was a paper published in the journal Scientific Reports, and in the study, a group of social drinkers were given a word learning task, and they were told to drink as much as they like, split into two groups. The average was 4 units, and those who drank more remembered more.
OK, there you go. Very well
explained. Hope for us all.
There you go.
How many units do you drink?
More than that.
Like 10 a week.
A week?
Yeah, is that bad?
No, I think that's fine.
None this week, because I'm having an alcohol-free month.
Good for you. Well, on that note, we'll get more from you at 11:30 and hopefully no sherries in between.
Nope.
But for now, let's get a check on that weather.